We set ourselves these standards that we hear on podcasts and on YouTube videos and self-help books, but those things aren't necessarily right for us. And then when we don't reach these insurmountable mountains in our own lives, we think there's something wrong with us. And then we land up feeling so bad about ourselves. And there's such self-loathing and hatred that comes with that. And that just turns into a vicious cycle.
Hi, my name is Nirish Shakya, and welcome to today's episode of the Design Feeling Podcast. I'm here at my brother's place in Sydney, Australia. I recently gave a talk here at the Sydney Design Thinking Meetup, and that's where I met my guest for today's episode, Petra Williams. Petra is a global motivational speaker, qualified life coach, presenter, and a poet of 10 years. In this episode, we delve into the different layers of our identity and how understanding how each of those layers thinks and acts can help us make more empowered choices in life. Petra also talks about the importance of both internal self-reflection and external support networks. And stay tuned to hear Petra's own personal story of overcoming fear and shame to live more authentically, and her journey of then going on to become a coach to help others do the same. And congratulations to Jason Davey for winning a signed copy of the highly anticipated book Designing Tomorrow by Martin Tomich and Steve Beatty. And if you missed out last time, don't worry. We have one more signed copy of the book to give away. To be in a chance to win that signed copy, all you have to do is comment on our social media post, or maybe private message me directly on any of my social media channels, or you can just email me at nirish@designfeeling.co with the response to the question, what would you like to design about tomorrow? And the best response picked by Martin and Steve will win a signed copy of their book, Designing Tomorrow. And now, let's get into the episode. Petra Williams, welcome to Design Feeling. How have you been?
I am so great and so pumped to be here. So yeah, ready to get going.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much for reaching out because, we met at the recent Sydney Design Thinking Meetup where I was a speaker, and it was great to meet you there and listen to some of your thoughts around, designing your own life, taking agency of your own life. And I think we are pretty much along the same wavelength when it comes to taking that agency, whether that's in your career as a designer or what you want to do in life. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for this conversation and where it's going to go.
Yeah, me too. And I love how the universe works, like how it brings us together, with the right people at the right time. So that was just fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Exciting.
Great. Well, first of all, I'm sure, people must be wondering, who is Petra Williams? Now, there is a generic question that I can ask, hey, tell me about yourself, but I want to put a slightly different twist to it. So let's imagine that people are watching a movie about Petra Williams, right? The movie has started. The movie is titled Petra Williams. What can they expect to see in the opening scene?
Oh, well, I love this. I love talking about myself. It's my favorite topic. The opening scene would be me standing on Mount Everest with the blind man that I just lit up there, and with my arms open wide, laughing and smiling and just embracing life. And that's really, I run my life at 100 miles an hour. I love adventure. I love living life. I've been to 41 countries. I've done some really cool things. As I said, led a blind man to Mount Everest. I've ridden a motorbike through Vietnam. I've skydived over the Swiss Alps out of a helicopter. And for me, I love living a life. And what's really important for me is I love sharing. I love giving the people the knowledge to make better choices. And those are the two things that really excite me. And so that's probably what you'll see is me being on Mount Everest with the blind guy. Well, we called him the blind guy, aka the blind guy, and his name's Trevor. And but also the Everest is also I have my arms open, welcoming others to join me on the journey.
So yes, I did read that you have been to Everest. When you say you're standing on Everest, where on Everest was it? Was it at the top or base camp?
No, not at the top. No, I'm not that No, I'm not that extreme. Like that's just crazy shit. Like who does that shit, right? No, I went to a place called Gokyori, which is just a little bit higher than base camp. So it was like 5,400 meters up. And I chose not to do base camp because I'm a real nonconformist. I don't like doing things that are normal. And Everest Base Camp, I also heard, is really, really filthy. So I just wasn't prepared to do that. So no. I went to Gokyori. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I mean, that itself must have been a pretty amazing experience, especially leading someone who's visually impaired, up the mountain. I mean, I come from Nepal, as you know. Like I was born in Nepal, so the mountains always, hold a special place in my heart. And yeah, for a long time, I did, see. Well, I was kind of hoping to climb one of the mountains sometime, but I've never actually done it. But having said that, I did propose to my wife, who's Australian, on top of a hill in Nepal, overlooking all the mountain ranges. So yeah, that's one of the bucket list items ticked off.
Hey, awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. So what would happen next in that movie? What would the next thing people would see?
Oh, what would the next thing be? Oh my God, it's so exciting. Look, really what I'm working on now, because I have my own life coaching practice and I've had it for 8 years now, 8 to 10 years, depends which date you want to refer to. And, I have found in my own life and in my clients' lives that there's so much inspiration out there and there's so much information. And most of us can spew that shit out of our asses, right? Like, I swear we can all be gurus because we all know the stuff, right? And yet so few of us, and I include myself in this because I've experienced myself, aren't actually living the life that we want, right? We're still stuck in our own ruts, right? And so my mission now is to move people from inspiration to implementation. And what I have found, Nirish, in the personal development, self-help, spiritual space is that there is so much bullshit. Like, fuck, there's so much bullshit out there that we often measure ourselves by what am I going to say? We set ourselves these standards that we hear on podcasts and on YouTube videos and self-help books, but those things aren't necessarily right for us. And then when we don't reach these insurmountable mountains in our own lives, we think there's something wrong with us. And then we land up feeling so bad about ourselves. And there's such self-loathing and hatred that comes with that. And then that just turns into a vicious cycle. And I don't want people to feel that. It's, and so my mission now is really to help people move from that inspiration to implementation stage. And that's where it's at. And the way I'm doing that is through a program that I've created, but also through retreats and just by actually calling the BS. Because I think we have to remember, we have to remember that the personal development space in the US alone is worth $1.8 trillion. $1.8 trillion, right? That means that there's a real commercial angle to it, right? And so much of stuff is online now. And I'm like, oh, no problem. Just fork out the $7,000 and we'll help you. It doesn't work, right? And it irks me. And so that's the next movie. I think the next scene of the movie.
So, how did you get into coaching in the first place?
Yeah, cool. Like it's an interesting story, right? There's been many stages in my life where I've gone, crap, what's next? So what I've learned about myself, I didn't notice before coaching, but I was in the state, I was living in New Zealand. I'll never forget this. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and I was in a marketing job, right, for a non-for-profit. And I had sort of plateaued, and I was so miserable because I wasn't enjoying the work I was doing. I felt stagnated, but I didn't know the way forward. And that for me is the worst. Like, that indecision. It's just that misery. And in my misery, I sort of reached out to someone and she said, hey, how about you do a Myers-Briggs profile? And I'd never heard of Myers-Briggs at the time. I'm not sure if have you heard of Myers-Briggs?
Yes.
Yeah, Myers-Briggs, it's like a profile thing, right? And I remember doing the profile and the guy running it through it with me, and he said to me, you've got exceptional leadership qualities. You are a leader. And life coach, and the profession of a life coach would really work for you. And this was before life coaching was a thing, right? And at the time, I tell you, I was in such misery. I was in such a deep hole. I couldn't take that on. I was like, how could I possibly be a leader and guide people? And so that just sat. And then it must have been about 5 years later, I was again in this, like, this is a cycle of my life, right? I do something and then I get to the stage where I go, whoa, what's next, right? Again, I was at the stage of like, okay, I've done this now, what's next? And this ad for life coaching came on Facebook. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And so I did my diploma in life coaching and neurolinguistic programming. And that just opened up my world to my own patterning, to my own behavior. And from there, I first got my own coaching so I could sort myself out. And because I saw the great impact it had on my own life, I then finally was able to step into the coaching space and then open my own practice from that space.
So when you say impact, can you talk us through that impact? Like, what were you before? How were you like before this transformation, and how did you go about taking yourself through this transformation?
Yeah, cool. Like, great question, right? So as I described before, I would run at 100 miles an hour and I would hit a wall and then I would crumble. That was my pattern, right? It was not pretty. I can tell you it's not pretty. Like, I'm high energy, but when I crash, right? And I couldn't see the pattern. Like, I couldn't see that. I couldn't see what was motivating me. I was often playing the victim. Yeah, I love the victim mode. Like, I hate the victim mode because I play it so often. I used to play it so often, right? And I still fall into it every now and then. I'm like, I'm not going to kid you, right? I'm not Moses, right? And but then when I started doing the course, I started seeing my own behavior. It's interesting. Like, I almost feel like I want to take it out of my chest, like this ball into my hand, and I'm looking at it in front of me. And I realized that what was happening in my life is that I didn't trust myself to really go for what I wanted. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to have my own business. And so I didn't have the self-worth or the confidence to do that. And so I would take on jobs that I didn't enjoy and they didn't challenge me. And so I would land up in the spiral. And so that was all linked to childhood trauma stuff, as it often is. I always say if you don't need therapy from your childhood, your parents did not do a good job. And then from seeing that and exploring that and dealing with that, over years, guys, I don't want to fucking joke you here. Like, it's not like, and I didn't have an aha moment when I was like, oh my God, the angels came out of heavens and all of a sudden I was healed, I was cured. It wasn't like that. It took years of working through my stuff to then eventually find out the information I needed and then take the steps to then open the practice. And that, that was a process for me. And it is a lifelong process. It doesn't stop because as we grow, as we do different things, we morph and grow and then new challenges come up, right? So, and that's sort of how that happened for me.
So, if you could give advice to that self before this journey, what is the advice you could give that person? You're running 100 miles an hour, you're crashing and burning.
What advice would I give that person? It's interesting, isn't it? My advice would be listen to yourself. Like listen to the inner calling and trust that inner calling. Like listen. Because Nirish, I don't know if you felt the same, and I mean, from your talk, you expressed that you felt while you were, having all these successes and achieving all these things, but innately and inwardly, you knew something was up. And so often we have that voice, don't we? We have it. Maybe it's not a voice, maybe it's a feeling or whatever, but we have that gnawing. And I don't know if in New Zealand you get sandflies. I'm not sure if you guys know what sandflies are, but they are like, do you know what sandflies are? Nirish? You know what a sandfly
I do, yeah. Please do tell us.
Yeah, but it's this tiny, like it's minuscule, like it's the size of the needle head, right? They're minuscule, but they are bastards. Like when they get you, and they fucking swarms. It's not like one. There's like 1,000 of them, right? And that stuff itches for days, right? And that's what I inference that gnawing is, right? Like it's this constant feeling that, hey, there's something up. And so often we don't want to face that. Like I didn't want to face that because that actually meant I had to stop and take a look at my actions and my response and take responsibility for my life. And because our lives are the product of our choices, right? And so for me, I had to stop and actually say, Petra, the life you're living is because of the choices you're making and the choices you are making. And that took me some courage. So the thing I would say to myself is listen to that voice and listen to it without judgment and then follow it. And that's what I'd say to myself.
Yeah, I've heard arguments on both sides of the coin where there's this school of thought where you are 100% responsible for your life and the way you are has been determined by the choices you've made in the past. And then there's another school of thought which kind of talks about no, you're not 100% responsible for your life. You have been shaped by your environment. You've been conditioned by school, society. You were born into a certain level of privilege, which pretty much dictates like what opportunities that that become available to you. And Sam Harris, the psychologist and the spiritual teacher, goes to saying that free will itself is an illusion, where we don't have free will because every decision we make has been again conditioned for us to make. Where do you stand in this in this spectrum?
I love this, Nirish, because I just want to share with the audience, like when Nirish and I had a conversation before the podcast, he was testing me out, guys, for you, to make sure I was a worthy guest.
So just do my job.
And again, I was selected. I'm one of the chosen ones. And I said to him, because he kept challenging me on stuff, and I was like, let's do this. Like, let's challenge this because I really want to nut some shit out because, as I said, the personal development space is full of bullshit. Okay. The one thing I do want to say is this is how I see things. Okay. So you cannot, and you've heard this 1,000 times, but I really want to nut this out. You cannot control what happens in life, but you can control how you respond to it. Okay? So this is really, and your response is 100% influenced by your past experiences, by your past influences. Yes. Okay? So where the responsibility comes from, so let me break up the word. Responsibility, how I break that up for myself and my clients is your ability to respond. Okay? Your ability to respond. So your responsibility is your ability to respond. And so the work is in freeing yourself from your past influences so that you are able to respond in the way that you want to respond. But let me break this down a little bit because it's like freaking up there. And okay, so what do I mean by freeing yourself? So there's a difference between responding and reacting, right? What do you think the difference between responding and reacting is, Nirish?
I would say responding comes from a space of awareness. It comes from this mindset of proactivity rather than reactivity. Whereas obviously the word react is you are reacting to a stimulus where maybe you might or might not have agency over that reaction.
Exactly, right? So that's the difference.
Was that
right?
the correct answer?
There's no correct. There's no other right. It's your opinion.
Were you testing me this time?
But that's exactly right. So, so when I say you're responsible for your life, what I'm saying there is you're able to respond. And in order for you to be able to respond, you need to be able to notice your triggers, right? You need to be able to notice your patterning and how you respond. For example, this is a pathetic example, but I think it really drives it. Okay, so I really want to make this real. My husband just shoves shit in the dishwasher. Like, just shoves it in.
Isn't that what you
closes it? Yeah. Yes, babe. Me, I'm all about efficiency, right? Like, I'm like, you have to pack the cups go on the left-hand side. This goes on the right-hand side. Like, yeah, I know how to pack it so I can get the most in there. And what he also does is he just stacks shit on top of each other so the dishwasher doesn't wash it because it's not, And when I open the dishwasher and I see his way of doing it, I can literally feel my blood boiling. Like, it is super weird. Like, I feel so triggered by that. Okay. And so my normal reaction would be to turn around and have something very verbal to say about that, right? So and after 17 years of marriage, you think I could let that shit go, right? So in that example, though, what I've learned is I open the dishwasher and I see that. And I go, okay, like, this is not the wrong way of packing the dishwasher. It's just a different way. Okay. So let me pack it the way I want to pack it. And I breathe through the feeling I call anger. And then I close the dishwasher, put the little bag and turn it on. And I just walk away and I don't say anything. Right. And that's what I mean between the difference of responding and reaction. Right. So when I say you're responsible, it's just how you respond to your life and what happens to life. So I don't know what the Stone's definition of that is, but it really is about looking at how you are triggered, why you're triggered, and choosing different behavior to that.
So besides your husband shoving things in the dishwasher, what triggers you in life?
Lots. Stupid people trigger me. Stupid people. Bad drivers. It's interesting, this journey for me, because what I'm most triggered by is my own complacency. Sometimes what I'm most triggered by is my own lack of action and my own fear response. And I can be my own worst enemy. So I'm so good at being my own worst enemy. And so um, the one thing that the reason I really started this program is, is like I spent 10 years of my life hiding, right? Hiding in plain sight. And I really want to share this because I think this happens to a lot of us. Is, on the surface, it looked like I had it all together. This personal brand, my personal brand was one of amazingness and awesomeness and energy. Okay. And when you meet me, I'm outspoken and I'm, like high energy, but really I wasn't living the life I wanted to live. Like I was running this life coaching practice. Sometimes it was okay. Sometimes it wasn't. When it wasn't, my husband then financially supported me, which was a real problem for me because that was not fair on him. I wanted to, for many years, be speaking on stages around the world and would help other people achieve that, but wasn't doing it myself. And so what was happening is not only was I helping people achieve their dreams as a coach, but I was just not making it happen for myself, right? And then my world became very small and I became sort of shameful. I was ashamed at that. And and because I was ashamed, I didn't ask for help, right? Because, I've got my shit together. Like my identity is that I've got my shit together. Look at all the cool shit stuff I've done. And so I didn't ask for help. And I spiraled. This is the story of my life. And eventually I looked at my life and I was like, holy hell, my marriage is shit. My finances are shit. I feel like death. It was like my life force was diminishing. Like I honestly, I don't know what death feels like, but I think that's what it was for me, right? And I thought, God, I have to do something about this. And so then I hired an expensive coach. And I was just like, that's not working. And I signed up for another program and that's not working. And that's when I realized what I always need to be true is like, I really just need someone to help me plan. Like plan, sit and hold my hand. I need someone to support me in that. Because I'm hearing my own language. I don't do structure well. I'm an ideas person. I get excited by the idea. And then I'm a gonna person. I'm gonna, because I'm excited by the idea. And I was the implementer. And so, I did. I hired someone to help me implement. And that changed my life. It changed my life. I didn't need any more mindset work. I didn't need any more healing or inspiration. What I needed was someone to give me clarity, help me get clarity, and then plan. And so what triggers me the most is my own when I tune in on myself. That really fucks me off because I'm like, that's not helpful.
Yeah. And when it comes to tuning into yourself, there is such a wealth of information in there if you were to if we were to look inside. And one of the materials that you sent me in one of your earlier emails that really intrigued me was what you call the inner illumination model, right? And I remember you mentioned that people tell us to be ourselves, but what does that even mean? And I liked how you kind of painted that picture of the 4 layers of the self that we tend to have. Could you talk us through those to that model?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just give you a little background on the model. So while going through this, it's all about, be your authentic self. Show up in your authentic self. Like there's this word authenticity. It's such a buzzword, right? But what does that even mean? and how do I know who I am? Like, and how can I show up as my authentic self when I have so many voices and things telling me who I need to be? And I was finding that. And how do I know who I am? And then how do I know how to show up as that person? So I really sat down and looked at it. And I discovered the inner illumination model. And it starts from the outside in. Okay. And the outside, the first one is perception. And sometimes when we don't know who we're being, who we're showing up as, it's really useful to ask. Now, this can be shit scary, right? Because you actually need to go out there and ask, hey, how do I show up in our meetings with you? Right? So, Nirish, I'm gonna demonstrate with you. Hi, Nirish.
Hello.
This is the third time we've interacted. In the 3 times we've interacted together, what is your opinion of me? How have I showed up for you?
Well, the first thing that I sense is definitely your energy. You seem to be a very high energy person. There's definitely, I see a lot of kindness in terms of wanting to do your bit to help people. You seem extroverted. You seem like you're a people person. You like to talk, and you basically like to put yourself out there.
Great. Thanks for sharing. And this is sort of what we do, right? We do that. That's what I encourage you to do, to go out to different people and ask them. So you start off with warm leads. Do not ask family.
Why is that?
Ask family. Well, you know what? They are the ones they will trigger. Okay. So I always think, I don't think necessarily family can answer honestly, right? Because there's such history there, right? My recommendation is not to ask family, unless you have a particularly close relationship with your family, right? So when you ask clients, I show like an email. You can say, hey, I'm really working at showing up in the best version of myself when I interact with you. Could you please tell me your thoughts on how your dealings with me, right? And just getting that response. So most people will not tell you something that you don't want to hear, because people don't want to hurt your feelings, right?
No.
But, asking friends and say, hey, could you please be honest? And when I did this with my friends, they were like, you're high energy, you're so much fun to be around, you're very insightful and introspective, but you don't finish stuff, right? And you don't delegate very well, and you're fiercely independent, and you don't let us in, right? You have this wall, and so getting that response is really important. The trick here is not to spiral. Because if someone says something and it whacks you, the trick is not to spiral. You're not doing, there's 8 billion people in this world. If you ask 8 billion people, each person will have their own opinion of you, right? But the purpose of this is only to start looking at trends of how you're showing up, okay? And to see your shadow side. Because I don't know about you, but I don't like looking at that side. I don't like it about myself. So it's a really nice activity to go through. So it takes courage, but it also it's worth it. It really is worth it. And if you can ask that person you don't get on with, well, if you don't get on with someone and you ask them and they are honest, then you'll get a very good feedback. You'll get good feedback from them. Yeah. Who would you ask?
Who would I ask?
Yeah.
Let's see.
For feedback, who's the person you don't get on with that you would ask?
Well, right now, I don't have a person I don't get along with very well. But yeah, I've had colleagues in the past that, we haven't really, seen eye to eye. But yeah, I can think of a few names, a few faces. I can definitely, ask.
So when I want to say to that, and I know this is Jay saying, I don't know this to be true for you. If you are in a circle with everyone who agrees with you, you need to expand your circle, right? Don't hang out with the yes people, right? Because otherwise, you're too comfortable. You're too comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step I do. And once you get the feedback, as I said, the second level is persona. And the persona is how you want to show up in the world. So you look at the feedback, you look at the trends, and you go, okay, great, I'm really enjoy how I'm showing up here, but these are things I don't like about how I'm showing up. So how am I going to change that? Okay, so an example to me is like, as you articulated, I'm really high energy, I'm really full of life, and so I really enjoy that, and that really is amazing. But the one thing I really focus on is sometimes taking a back seat and actually listening and actually being present to listen and to learn and not to think I have all the answers, right? I enjoy being fiercely independent, and there's also times when I do hearing other people's experience and learning from that is also really valuable, right? So it's those are examples of how I choose to show up in the world, right? So your persona is your personality and how you choose it. And then that's the second layer. The third layer is truly, in my experience, the one that can really fuck you over, and that's the one with your ego. This is what you think of you. And this can be hard, right? Because the ego will either inflate you or deflate you. It's this constant yo-yo,
So,
right?
Petra, is this like
it's
a self-perception? So is ego pretty much, self-perception, or is it something different?
The way I would articulate your ego is just that inner voice, the inner voice of how you see yourself, right? So sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, babe, honestly, stop the press. You are hot. And I walk through life like, of course everyone wants to know me, right? And then sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, Jesus, girl, like, I don't know, man. Like, you look like dog's breakfast. And and the language I'm using here, this is really the language, this is how I speak to myself, right? And we all have that inner voice, right? And when that inner voice really comes up, when that inner voice really comes up, when you want to create change, that's when that ego comes in. Oh, who do you think you are? You're never going to make it. You're not good enough. Like, that real mean, nasty bastard of a voice who comes in, right? And so that ego, it's acknowledging that it exists. It's acknowledging the voices and then not adhering or responding to either. So not as responding to you're great or you're awful, right?
So why does the ego exist? What's the purpose of ego?
We need an ego to exist in society, right? We need an ego. So an ego is based on our past, right? So we need the ego to keep us in check, to keep us in check with society. If we didn't have an ego and everyone did whatever they bloody well wanted, we'd have people frolicking naked. No one wants to see your naked ass. Put some clothes on, right? But the ego is really just to help us fit into a society and to belong. It gives us it keeps us safe, right? It keeps us safe. The trick is sometimes we need to take a risk right? Sometimes we need to step out of that safety zone. Often the ego is formed in our formative years between 0 and 7, okay? And what we thought keeps us safe in that age is not relevant to our adult self. So it's really about examining that ego. The best way I have found that, I've done a lot of work on myself. 12 years, but the greatest way I've really found is one is forgiveness. Honestly, I'm so hard on myself. It's just to forgive myself, right? And the way I've really done that is by just going, hey, it is what it is, and you're okay. It is what it is, and you're okay. And I also started writing poetry. I do a lot of meditation. I started a meditation practice. I spent 2 months in India, traveling through India solo in a month in ashram. I really cemented my spiritual practice, which includes meditation, one of them, and yoga. And in that meditation practice, I'm able to sit for 20 plus minutes without moving or responding while my head goes crazy, while the ego goes crazy. And that is a good practice for me. And it has really helped me distinguish between the reality of where I'm at and what the ego is telling me. Is that making sense? And I don't want it to be too high level.
So in your meditation, when you sit down to meditate, you said your head goes crazy. I wanna kind of maybe give whoever's listening right now kind of like a bit of a picture of that, so that when they try a meditation for themselves, maybe they're a first-time meditator, so they can kind of know what to expect. Because I know a lot of people, they try meditation and they get distracted by all these thoughts, and they're like, oh, meditation is not for me, and they just give up. What does that the craziness feel like and look like for you?
For me, great question. And I love that we're having this discussion, because again, when something becomes mainstream, it just gets fucked up. So, how I like to, because I'm a visual person, right? So how I like to inference it is like your thoughts are like leaves in your brain, in your head, right? And if your brain's anything like mine, we all have different brains, but mine is like a whirlwind of leaves. It's a hurricane of leaves, and it's spinning like crazy shit. And it's not one hurricane, it's like 60 hurricanes in there, right? And it feels like you were saying, yeah? And it feels like it's knocking at my brain, and it literally feels like my head's going to be explode, right? And the thing with meditation is like they say you have to stop thinking, but it's not possible, right? Your brain is designed to think. But, you don't say to your heart, stop beating. I'm meditating, so stop beating. You don't say to your digestive system, hey, I'm meditating, so stop digesting, right? So it's acknowledging that the thoughts are there, but it's not reacting to them. So generally when a thought comes up, we do something, right? Like if a thought comes up that I don't like, I generally will distract myself by stuffing something in my mouth, right? I have done emotional eating in the past, and I've sort of curbed that habit, but that was really a habit of mine, right? So it's just about sitting there and just letting the thoughts go, mental, and not doing anything. And that is the first step, right? And please do not start off with 20 minutes. Start off with 2 minutes, right? 2 minutes. If you can sit for 2 minutes with that craziness in your head and not doing anything, you've already achieved something, right? And then you go to 3 minutes, and you go to 4 minutes, right? And you don't have to sit a particular way. It's advised that you sit up straight with your back, not leaning against anything. But don't get caught up in all of that shit, right? You don't have to sit crossed legs, man. Crossed legs is hard work. It cramps my legs, man, right? But it's just about sitting. It's just sitting still. Just sit still for 2 minutes. And then you grab, for 3 minutes. And in fact, my friend, Jason, he runs a charity called Meditation HQ. And they have just this month started the 1 million meditation month of May. It's to encourage people to meditate. And they do these, and they've recorded all these amazing guided meditations. And I recommend, if you want to start meditating, start with guided meditation. Because that's usually the easiest way. It's to teach you your breathing, teach you how to scan your body, so to get out of your head and into your body. And so that's a really great way to start. Look up Meditation HQ or anything, any meditation app, and start slowly. Just give yourself some space.
Yeah. I love that. Even in my own meditation practice, meditation, those sessions definitely give me an opportunity. There's a space to just, like you said, observe my own ego and the thoughts that kind of just spits out every moment. And a lot of times we're not aware of these thoughts because they just happen so much in the background, but they dictate so much of how we feel in any given moment. For example, let's say just like last week, for example, I was waiting for a response from someone and they didn't reply for a few days. And my ego was telling me, hey, that's because that the person doesn't like you. Maybe you're not good enough. You should be ashamed. And all these automatic kind of responses that the brain tends to generate to make you, alert of possible danger, which might or might not be the case, but just being aware of that ego kind of raising its head and alerting you of these different signals, I find that it gives me a lot of, a sense of peace rather than, reacting to this blindly and instinctively saying, yes, I'm not good enough. There's something that I did wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? We do live in a world of distraction, guys. I did a short film called Look Up. And I literally went from my house in Sydney, walked to the bus stop, got on the bus, got off Sydney City, and then walked through Sydney City and here in Australia. And I was filming on my GoPro, and everyone was on their phone. Everyone was on their phone. And then the video ended with my husband running me over with a car. Now, not literally.
For real?
And I said to him, not literally, obviously I'm still here, but when we did it, I said to him, floor it, I'll jump up the way. And he refused to. He's like, I don't want to kill you. I'm like, anyway. But so very rarely do we give our brains time to rest. And you know what happens with phones? This is quite serious, right? So phones give us dopamine. Dopamine's a happy drug, right? A happy chemical. What happens with our brain is because we're constantly stimulated, our dopamine levels are so high that we can no longer just experience pleasure in the simple things, right? We literally have to now jump out of an airplane to experience any pleasure, right? And so we become emotionally dead. We can't find pleasure in stuff, right? And so then there's any surprise that depression, anxiety, and all those symptoms, whatever, are on the rise, right? And we're constantly stimulated, and then we can't sleep, and distracted. And so what meditation does, it just gives your brain a break. It just gives it a break, right? And I would imagine if you're listening to this podcast and if you're in the human design space, you are an ideas person and you are a creator and your brain is working a lot. There is a real sense for me, certainly, of just because your brain is your biggest organ and it takes the most energy, right? And sometimes I just get fucking exhausted. Because of my brain, right? And so that's what meditation does for me. And and I also exercise. Like, I need to exercise. Like, I need to. So again, like, we're so used to sitting and not moving our bodies. Like, I need to move. I salsa dance 3 times a week. I do social salsa dancing. I went to Cuba last year to learn salsa in Cuba. And so I love salsa dancing. And I gym, when I joined the gym at the beginning of the year, I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, I would not have been caught dead in a gym. And I was like, you know what? Time to make some changes, right? So change. So find your form of meditation. You don't necessarily have to sit. I do encourage you to give it a go. But you can find your form of meditation, whether that's running or exercising or whatever that is for you, right? There's not one size fits all.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we could probably have an entire episode just on the topic of ego, but I'm loving all these different techniques that we can use, not to defeat the ego, but maybe manage it, maybe like befriend it, because we probably won't be able to defeat the ego because it's such an integral part of how we are built as humans. But we can definitely, be there as a friend saying, hey, it's okay, you're safe. You don't need to, chase every thought that comes to your head.
That's a nice way. Like, that's it. Like, choosing how to respond, right? Be free of that. And in the final stage of the inner illumination model, which I almost forgot about because I got so excited talking about everything else. And thank you for bringing us back. That is when you come back to your core self. Now, the core self, in my experience, and what I've seen all around me, is that beautiful space of love and light. Like, that is really who we are. And I always inference it. Now, I don't want to be wanky about this because this often happens, but, when I look at a young child, a toddler, and they are just beaming, like their eyes are bright and they just beaming. I've never seen, a toddler go, oh man, I don't like my toe, right? But just like they just, and when a baby laughs, we just laugh. That's just what it is, right? And that in essence is who we are, really in essence. And so when we have transcended the perception of what we think people think of us and have freed ourselves from that, when we have freed ourselves from our personality of how we think we need to show up in the world, when we've freed ourselves from the ego who tells us we are the great and not great, when we've really freed ourselves from all of that, and it is possible. But once again, I do want to reiterate, it's not a one-time thing. This is a lifelong process, guys. Please don't, I think this is where we screw ourselves over. We think we get it and we have it. I wish, right? Wouldn't that be, well, it wouldn't be amazing because that means we're not growing, right? But then once we've freed ourselves from all of that and we can just let that go, what's there is the purest form, is our love and our light. And when we can come from that space, when we can come from the space of worthiness, when we can come from the space of deserving, not because we've done anything, not because we've said anything, just because we are. That is a beautiful space. And I can't describe it for you because there are no words to describe that beingness, but it is a beingness. And there are a few people out there, we sometimes call them larger than life, right? We call them exuberant, right? Those are the people who come from that place of love and light. And when we come from that place of love and light, we love everyone and everything because that's who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's not romantic love. It's not sexual love. I say this, but, sometimes people think some weird shit, right? It's just knowing that you are worthy and coming from that place. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful place.
I guess, yeah, it would be the love for the experience of the existence just as it is, rather than, wanting it to be something different.
Yes. And that's exactly what it is, Nirish. And that word that keeps coming up for me in all these practices is acceptance. Like when you can truly be in the moment and truly accept it for what it is. Because the ego will tell you, oh, it shouldn't be like this. Oh, there shouldn't be a war and there shouldn't be this. But if you can really sit in the essence of knowing that everything is exactly as it's meant to be, and really sit in that and know that as a knowing, not as a thinking, as a knowing, that is a beautiful space to be in. And to come from that space and live from that space and know that no matter what happens, you're always okay. That is a real spiritual journey that not many people choose to undertake, because it is certainly one where you have to let go of a lot of stuff. And one thing you really have to let go of there is your identity of who you are being in the world. And your brain will fight to the death to protect its identity. I am X. And it's it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and that also again is a lifelong journey, because we hold such strong identities based on our professions or our roles in a family or in a society, that it is very difficult to first of all be aware of them, because they're so integrated into our way of being and thinking. But also, if there's an identity that is not serving us anymore, letting go of that identity and seeking something new can also be challenging. And the reason I'm saying this is because even in the world of design and tech and product, there are so many people currently battling those identities, especially a lot of people who've been made redundant, for example, or a lot of people are currently looking for roles and finding it difficult to find a role. It's not as easy nowadays because of whatever the reason might be, like economic or or more. So for people who might be in that position right now, that kind of the uncertainty, and their own kind of expectations of who they are and where they should be in life. How can they maybe use this model to get, well, first of all, a better understanding of themselves, and then take those proactive steps to respond rather than react, so that they can progress into the next step in their life?
Yeah, great question. And I remember when my husband was made redundant, and his identity was so tied up to his executive role. And I sort of, I got him a coach, because you don't coach your partners ever. It lands a divorce for sure. I don't know if you've tried it, Nirish, but if you haven't, don't do that. The first thing I would say is get some help with this, okay? Either through a coach or a counselor. And the reason I say this is because sometimes when we're in that place where we're feeling a lot of strong emotion around something, we can't think clearly. Like our neurofrontal cortex, which is our fabulous human brain in the front in our new development, it really does shut down. And we need someone to help us out of that. So get someone to help you. In Australia, there are so many amazing services. I'm not sure at the UK, Nirish, you can speak to that, right? But there's a lot of services here. And then really start looking at your relationship to your role, like your relationship to who you think you are. The greatest challenge my husband had is, I'm like, you've got so many transferable skills, right? You've got so many skills you can transfer, but he couldn't see it. He was like, no, I'm this person, and this is what I'm a designer, and this is what I do, and I can't do anything else. And no. And so really changing that view of what's possible for yourself and exploring it for yourself is a really essential piece. And I know that I don't know you from both, so I imagine that's often challenging to do that, especially when you're in a panic state of, oh my God, I need to get a job. Why am I not getting a job? And then it just becomes a perpetual cycle, doesn't it? Like it's panic. And this is really where you do need to do it. And so when you need to go and find someone and say, what is that identity I have attached to this job, and is that serving me? And then you go, and once you've looked at that, then you go, well, what's the next possible steps available to me? Because what often happens is when we're in a dark place, we don't see possibility, right? We get tunnel vision and we don't see possibility. So then I would recommend getting a career coach. Okay. I just recommend getting help, guys. Really, and you're like, why would I invest in this? I don't have the money, I don't have the cash. Find the money to invest in that, right? There's lots of, again, in Australia, there's lots of free services, but sit down with that person and go, okay, well, what are the possibilities? What's next? Where can I go next, and what do I need to do? So once again, it's that implementation stage of what's the next step. Do not don't look too far into the future. Don't future pace too far, because that will fuck us over, right? We get overwhelmed. Oh my God, we're going to die. I don't have a job. I overthink and we die. No.
Death
What's
is
the next step? Yeah, the ultimate fear is death, right? What's the next step? And do that step. And then what's the next step? And then do that step. It is really about step by step by step by step, baby steps, right? But that's what I would recommend there is mind. The ego will tell you, it will play havoc with you. I would like to say that you meditate. I guessing that's not going to happen for you, right? Because for you to sit still in that time, so it's probably a time of action. So find the right people to help you with the right action. Because if you keep doing, and this is such a dicky thing to say, and it's keep saying, but if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll probably will get the same result. But I'm going to go a bit further than that. The reason you keep doing what you've always done is because you keep thinking the way you've always thought, right? So you have to change the way you think to be able to change the way you act. And it can also reverse, right? So it can also go, okay, well, I'm acting differently, so then I'm proving to myself that something different is possible. So they do yo-yo hand in hand, right? Because there's no point sitting at home thinking differently and not acting differently because then nothing's going to change. So sometimes it's a matter of proving to yourself that something different is possible. But my greatest thing is get help. And if, again, I do not recommend family, but if you do have someone like a friend or a colleague who you trust, go and talk to them as well, right? Do not let your fear of humiliation stop you. It's not fear of rejection. It's fear of humiliation.
Tell me more. What did you mean by that?
Tell you more. I just discovered this recently, okay? Because people keep saying fear of rejection. And I said this to my coach, because of course I have a coach. I mean, I wouldn't preach the gospel if I didn't. Then I think in today's world where we have personal branding, and we have to show ourselves as having our shit together, as I shared in my own story, it's not fear of rejection, because who's rejecting you? Who's rejecting you? My coach says, who's rejecting you? Who are you fearing? Who? And he said that to me, who's rejecting you? And I couldn't answer him. And then I thought to myself, it's not fear of rejection, it's fear of humiliation, because fear of humiliation is the death of the ego. It's the death of my identity, of who I'm presenting myself to be. And my God, the death of my identity, as we said, is our greatest fear. It's what our ego will fight tooth and nail for, right? So oh my God, you can't ask that person, because what will that person think, that you're not all that? you don't have all your shit together, you're not all that special. You're not like Nirish, the great guy with this awesome podcast. What do you mean? Right? Oh my God, what happens if they find out you're not all that? And that's what the ego will fight against. So I encourage you, instead of going, oh, I'm fear of humiliation, go the fear of regret. Because we regret things we haven't done. We never regret things. Well, not that we never. We rarely regret things that we've done. We regret things that we haven't done. So instead of going, oh my God, what happens if I'm humiliated? Go, would I regret not doing this? Like 5 years from now, 3 years from 1 year from now, will I regret not having taken this step? And really ask yourself that question. And if the answer is yes, then take it. It takes courage and it takes balls. But get the support you need. Do not do it on your own. Do not do it on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of years
Did that
ago.
make sense, Nirish? Do you understand the differentiation?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and it kind of reminds me of some of the work by Brene Brown around shame and how that can really debilitate us in terms of what actions we do take. A couple of years ago, I was in this forest in the UK, and I had this kind of profound moment where I was just sitting by the lake, watching the trees and the bushes around the lake, and it kind of took me back to my childhood and how I grew up with, so much fear of shame and humiliation, that through school, teachers, family, whatnot. And I realized that a lot of my life decisions and actions were driven by this avoidance of, shame and humiliation. And I was just looking at the nature around me. I'm like, do these trees, these plants, the lake, do they ever feel shame? And I was like, no, they just are. They're just happy the way they are. They're just using the conditions around them to just grow, or if they can't grow, just be there. And that made me question myself, why am I so scared of shame? Because we're all part of nature. We're all part of the same universe. But why does this affect us so much more?
I love that. One thing I do want to sort of articulate is I do really want to acknowledge, and I never want to blame society because who's society? The one time my friend, she was single and she was dating and she couldn't find someone she liked, whatever the situation was there. And she says, oh, society makes it so hard for us women, single women. I'm like, hey, magic. Honestly, so this society, tell me where to find this society, because this society is obviously really, really, making your life very difficult. Show me where society is, and I will fucking sort that out for you, right? And she goes, oh, don't be like that, right? But I don't like to label, but our culture, how I define culture is people like us do things like this, okay? People like us do things like this. In our Western culture, we do live in a shaming culture. Even in Australia, we have something called tall poppy syndrome, right? Where someone stands up and then, the inference is that we tear each other down, right? But we do live in a culture that shames failure. Really, we celebrate success. Look at all the posts you see about Elon Musk and all those other weirdos out there doing amazing things, right? But, but the minute someone does something and it doesn't work, God, the media fucking rips into it. Really, rips it. And all of us now, look, I would be talking out of term here because I didn't see anything about this, but there was recently a stabbing in Bondi Beach here, or Bondi Junction here in Australia. This is a very rare occurrence by us here in Australia. This kind of shit doesn't happen. Some guy from the little bit I don't know went to been AWOL, stabbed a few people and killed them. And someone was falsely accused, as far as I know. Again, fact check me on this one, but someone had posted a video or photo saying this is who the person was. This is who the person, the stabber was. And it was the wrong photo. And of course, they put it on. And, the power of socials and online, this person threatened, death threats, that kind of stuff, right? And it turned out to be false. And So this is the world we're living in. People don't fact check anymore. People don't go, people don't think for themselves and go, well, is that accurate? Right? They just fucking go. And so we do live in a society that does go out with pitchforks. Like, no joking, pitchforks. It goes. So for us to openly go, oh, that didn't work, and to openly, express our shame, is a very, very courageous act. I just really want to acknowledge that, right? Because it's easy to say, yeah, the tree doesn't have shame. And I acknowledge it, and I love trees. I love nature. But the tree doesn't have to live in my society, in my world, okay? This is why I keep reiterating support. We really must have support systems. And I say that because I didn't have support systems for the longest time because I sat in shame. Yeah, and it's a very lonely existence. And Brené Brown even talks about when we don't have a sense of belonging, there is always suffering, right? But the people who are most courageous have a support system, right? And so have that support system, whether it's friends, whether you hire a coach, whether you belong to a group, you must have someone in your corner because it's fucking hard. It's hard being in the arena, as Brené Brown says. You get bloody and you get messy and you need someone to fucking pull you out of there when you're almost like close to death, okay? And you're not looking very pretty. You're not looking handsome, right? And you need someone to pretty you up and just like put your clothes back on and do your makeup and then send you back out, right? So what I really want to say about that shame is acknowledge that it exists in society. Acknowledge and that doing new things and failing is a big deal. It is a big deal. But not doing it, the regret is a bigger deal, right? I always remember the story about a Russian guy. I'm sorry, I am tearing on a bit, but I do want to just really say this. I don't remember the story, but I do remember the ending where he's on his deathbed and he says to his wife, what happens if my whole life was wrong? What would happen if my whole life was wrong? And I remember that so clearly. And I think I am never getting to my deathbed and having that thought. And many of us can because we are sleepwalking.
So what were you ashamed of, let's say 5 years ago, that you're not ashamed of anymore?
I'm not ashamed of the shame. It sounds weird, right? I'm not ashamed of the shame, right? Because, like, if you had asked me, not even 5 years ago, Nirish, like, let's not fucking joke. Like, if you had asked me about 6 months ago, maybe, even, I would still be cowering. I'd still be like, oh my God, like, and now I can openly say, you know what? I was really ashamed of that behavior of actually, having a social media profile that looked amazing, but then actually not living that for truth. That wasn't truth, right? So like that was really it. I had this perception and everything that I was rocking awesome, but that wasn't my truth, right? And now I can openly say that I was ashamed of that behavior, right? And I was ashamed to reach out, and I was ashamed of the shame. And now I can openly speak to you about that. But if you'd asked me 6 months ago, I would not be having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess the ego finds its way to feel that shame and make you feel that shame. And it's like you said, it's a matter of embracing that nature of the ego rather than trying to fight it or trying to deny it.
And as Brené Brown, and I never work on this, I fucking love her shit, is shame sits in the darkness. We always think we're the only ones going through this. And this is why I'm actually openly talking about this now, is because I know many of us are going through this. I know we are. Like, this is you. I know you've experienced this. I've experienced this. The more we can open up and make it acceptable and have, I call it unconditional welcome. Unconditional welcome. No matter what voice pops up in my head, I'm like, You're welcome to express yourself, but I do not need to listen to you. If they voice like you're welcome, but I do not need to listen to you. So I will give you a voice. I will give you your time. Now your time's up. See you later. And that's not me. I'm not fighting that voice. I'm just like, you're welcome. Everyone's welcome. Please let everyone be civil, because I feel a lot of voices in my head. Lots of voices. But let's all be civil. Everyone will get a turn to say what they need to say. I will listen to all of you. And now you've had your say. And now we're done. And that really, and I sit and I do that in meditation. And I listen to, because you know what? You always have to remember the ego always has a positive intention. It always has there's always a positive reason. Like your ego's not there to fuck you up, right, and spit you out. Its intention is not to hurt you. Its intention is to keep you safe properly, right? So there's always a positive intention. So really, if you can look at that voice and go, what's the positive intention in that? What's the positive intention for this? And is it serving me? And then you thank the voice. You go, thank you, man. I know that you really want to keep me safe here. And that worked for me in the past, but it's not necessary anymore. I'm now in the driver's seat, so I really thank you. So go to the Bahamas, have a cocktail. You know, it's on me. See you later, right? And that's really how I talk to my voices.
Love that. I love all the corners that we've explored here in the last hour or so with this conversation. I think for me the key takeaway has been, again, creating that space to understand yourself and the different parts of yourself, whether that be the outer perception of yourself, or whether that be the persona that you're trying to build for yourself, or whether that be the ego telling you what to think of yourself, and maybe the deeper level, which is your truer self. And also using that knowledge to take those tiny steps, and I think you mentioned those, the value, the importance of tiny steps to move from implementation to inspiration to implementation. And that's something that personally I find it hard to do, and I'm sure a lot of people find it hard to do, because we're so caught up in these stories in our head of who we should be and who we should not be, and what we should do and what we should not do, that does not actually reflect the true reality of nature. And just embracing that and reframing your sense of identity can be really freeing. And when you're on this journey, another thing that I've learned from my conversation is, again, the importance of having good support networks, because it can be a very dark and lonely place a lot of these times, especially when it comes to topics such as shame and humiliation. So having that support network can be really beneficial, because we're not the only ones in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to finish off. For me, the journey back to self is really what we're all here for. I believe, a nice human experience that I don't want to call it. I suppose in that way, because I don't like calling things a journey, because that suggests a destination. And it suggests, I suppose the destination is death. We're all going to die, okay? But I like to call it a process, because a process is ever evolving, right? So for me, our greatest process in life is our process back to self. And you will know when you are ready. You will know the voice. The voice will tell you. And when it does, listen to the calling and seek out. And as they said, when the student's ready, the teacher will come. And I also just really want to share, I've just recently published an ebook with poetry and inspiration, my own poetry, that has come through my own process of going through this. And I really want the listeners to come and download that poetry book, because honestly, these words have come through me from the divine source, and they have the power to heal. And I've seen people read this, and the one thing I really, with these poems, is the essence and thread that keeps coming through is, you are worthy. You're worthy. Like this worthiness piece is so strong for many of us. So please jump on the website and go and download that book, because honestly, I just want people to read those words and let them fuel your inner self, your self of love and light, because that's who you really are.
Awesome. We'll put a link in the show note and the description as well for people to download your poetry book. Poetry is something that I've recently picked up through some poetry courses, and I have fallen in love with it. I think it's such a great way to get that access to your inner self, to your subconscious, and express that through words that is very difficult to do just through this normal mode of thinking, through this kind of logical mode of thinking. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking to learn more about yourself, to increase that self-awareness, try it. Give poetry a try. Maybe if especially you haven't done it before, it might open up new doors and windows for you.
Well, the funny thing about, I'm sorry, there is just quickly, the funny thing about poetry, sometimes it's so ambiguous. It's so crazy, right? I read it and I'm like, what the fuck is this about, right? So what I've done with my poetry book, because I've often read poetry and gone, what the hell? I've actually put an explanation in it, this is what I was going through. And this is the topic, with my mum, I had a bit of a tumultuous relationship with mum. And so I was focusing on that. And then this poem came through me. And then, so I've I've contextualized it, because I find often poetry so abstract. I don't know what's going on there, right? And then my brain won't let me enjoy it, because I'm constantly what's going on? What's going on? Is this the right meaning? So poetry is awesome. And for me, I've contextualized it so it actually makes sense.
Yeah, I find that sometimes, what comes out of the mind is not immediately understandable for us through that level of thinking that we currently have. But when you just let it simmer and incubate, when you come back to it, let's say after a week or two, maybe a month, then you can looking at it through a different perspective and through a different lens, and it can actually help you understand your own words better. That's why I don't tend to kind of filter my words when I'm expressing myself through poetry. Just let it all come out, because it doesn't have to make sense in that moment. It might never have to make sense, but you're just kind of doing yourself and the universe a favor by just expressing yourself in whatever way it comes out.
And you're doing us a favor by expressing yourself, right? Because that is a gift to the world too, if you choose to share it.
So any other, resources or books that you recommend that's, helped you a lot in your life or career?
Yeah, look, I mean, when you initially asked me this question, I did write down a book, which I'm not going to mention because I've changed my mind.
Okay, that's fine.
So the one book that really impacted me was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I'm not sure if it's a really thin book. So if you don't need to read it, it's I really recommend you read it. I don't know if it's available on audio, but I really recommend you read it. And Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist or psychologist. I can't remember. I don't know what the difference between the two. And he was stuck in the Holocaust and in a concentration camp. And he was reviewing how do some people still manage after these horrible, horrible things happen to them. How do they still keep going? And when those horrible, horrible things are over, how do they keep living? Because he said that some people died, their soul died in those experiences. And so how do you still keep having the zest for life? And the one quote that really stuck with me, and I'll probably butcher this, but this is how I remember it in my mind. He says, the choice is a spiritual freedom that cannot be taken away. It makes life meaningful and purposeful. And so what he really came to know was that we wake up every day and we make a choice on how to respond to our lives and the circumstances of our life. And if someone can do it going through the fucking Holocaust while being starved and beaten, and can get up and still make a choice to live, then we can all do it. And another thing he said is you have to have a vision of the future. You have to be working towards something. So lots of people going through the Holocaust, didn't feel like, I want to see my wife again and I want to see my daughter again. And I don't know if they were alive, but they had this thing that they held on to, the hope that gave them hope. Our vision needs to give us hope. And so he says having something to work towards, that hope gives us hope, and then that drives the choice to carry on. So I highly recommend that book. I think it's such an easy read and some really key takeaways there.
Love it. It's definitely, on my list of one of the most profound books I've read as well. So we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So, Petra, we started off with the opening scene of your movie, and now let's imagine it's the closing scene where imagine that you are on your deathbed and someone comes up to you with a tiny Post-it and a Sharpie and asks you to write, your last few words for humanity. What would you write on that tiny Post-it?
Life is for living. Life is for living. Freaking live it. And living is not screen, guys. Like, live life. Experience every morsel of it. It doesn't matter if it's asking someone out on a date or, trekking through the desert. Like, just live it. And Carolyn Mace, who's a modern mystic, I wish I could give one-word answers. I'm sorry, Nirish, but I just really love this quote. And it's on my phone, and she says, and I want to read this to you, and I'm going to leave you with this. It says, always go with the choice that scares you the most, because it is the one that is going to require the most from you. Do you really want to look back on your life and see how wonderful it could have been if you had not been afraid to live it? And that's what I would say. Life is for living. Live it. And those are my profound words.
I love those words, and I loved how you kind of, we're wrapping up this conversation with that profound quote there. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Petra. So if, people want to reach out to you, connect with you, or maybe work with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, totally. Like, jump on my website, Fiery Petra Williams. It's FIREY, PetraWilliams.com. Or just jump on LinkedIn. I do have socials. But probably the website's the best place, guys, because I really choose not to live life through my screen. And I'm one of those life coaches who does not encourage you to follow me on socials. I'd rather you just jump on my YouTube channel, which is Fiery Petra Williams, or my website. Go and check out what's available there. If you have a question, contact me. There's also a coaching call that you can jump on there if you want to do a 20-minute coaching call with me. Now, usually I charge $97 for that. But I will absolutely offer it to you guys for free. We will find a way to make sure that I do that. Nirish and I will talk about that a little bit later, how that's going to happen. And what I have actually written some notes on man's search for meaning, and I will also share that, some key takeaways. I was just thinking, what other gift can I give you guys? And because that's such a profound book and some key lessons, I have written notes on that, and I'll include that for you guys too. Because, sometimes at the reality, I know you're probably not going to go read that book. But there are some key takeaways that I really would love you to take on and meditate and chew on and implement. So, yeah, I'd love to do that.
Great, yeah. So maybe reach out to Petra through her email or social channels and mention that you've heard her on Design Feeling, and so that she knows that you've come through this podcast.
Brilliant. Yeah. Is that how we're doing it? That's how we're doing it?
Let's do that. Let's keep it simple.
That's how we're doing it. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
We've implemented the inspiration here.
Love it. You're awesome. Thank you for that.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy and your, joyful energy today, Petra. Thanks for being on the show. I personally have, taken a lot away from that. So yeah, thanks for sharing all the insights and wisdom.
Oh, and thank you so much for the beautiful discussion. I really do appreciate it.
So, what did you think of the conversation? What's the one thing that stood out to you? Drop it in the comments below, and please consider giving this video a like and a subscribe if you'd like to support this channel and get this video out to more people. And feel free to drop me a line if you'd like to share any thoughts or ideas or maybe suggestions for any topics or guests that you'd like to see. See you next time.